What they didn't portray during these 4 episodes, even in the first one, is the richness of the philosophy. And then another extremely difficult moment where absolutely everyone in the world was against me and against Rael. I'm very, very pleased to announce that the first baby clone is born.
There are no children allowed in the movement per se. You have to be an adult to enter it, and yet they say that the movement are there doing stuff with children.
Of course, we have that understanding that we have been created, that there is no God, that that we have been living with these Elohim coming from another planet, living with them, and then they went back to the stars.
George Fenech, who's the magistrate, he's so critical of Rael, particularly of Portrayal. He says some terrible things about him.
Fenech became famous because of that. At the same time, there were hundreds of thousands of kids that were molested in the Catholic Church, and nothing was done. Let's clarify things, right? There are no pedophilia happening ever in the Raelian Movement. And I was talking with the producer of the series, and he said himself that Rael has never been accused or condemned at the Congress. That I was under high pressure at the time. Once the baby was born, that was very different.
They were saying how good the movement had been for them. For example, Damien says, in fact, his quote is, the philosophy, it certainly relaxed me. I was a very closed-off teenager. I was emotionally deprived, and Rael definitely brought me out of my shell.
Because it's not just, okay, we have been created, and then, and then we want to welcome the one who created us. It's more than that. It's a philosophy of life, and it's how to interact with each other. And these images were talking more than anything I'd said.
There are 2 naked bums there, and everybody else has got clothes on. And she says, we were told, we had no choice, we had to get naked. But I did actually remove the bums as well, because again, I don't have a problem with anybody's bottom. I think they're beautiful things. But it was a totally false accusation. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first Raelian podcast in English. My name is Glenn Carter. I am a Raelian, member of the Raelian Movement, level 5 and all that stuff, which has got no bearing on anything we're going to talk about today, so we don't need to go into that. But what we are going to go into is the recent Netflix documentary about the Raelian Movement, which has just been released yesterday. There are 4 episodes, and we are going to talk about those. And we are very fortunate to be discussing this with Dr. Brigitte Boisselier, who is one of the leading lights in the Raelian Movement globally. So we're incredibly fortunate to have Brigitte with us. And hello, Brigitte.
Hi, Glenn. It's such a pleasure to interact with you always.
It's so nice to see you. So nice to see you, Brigitte. And looking so well and happy. You always have a wonderful smile on your face, even, I've noticed, under huge pressure. Yeah. So I don't know how you do that, but I'd like some lessons if you could do that for me. How do you feel having lived that global spotlight?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, the pressure that happens now is nothing compared to what I had back in 2000, between 2000 and 2003, I guess. But imagine, I think it shows in the images when you see my face, all my body language at the Congress and all that I was under high pressure at the time.
Yes.
Once the baby was born, that was very different. It did it, but that was another big push of adrenaline, and then another extremely difficult moments where absolutely everyone in the world was against me and against Rael, right? So
the amount of hostility that people feel when they feel exposed or threatened and I noticed this in the documentary actually, where I think the Bernard Siegel, I think, is the lawyer that tried to take you to court in Miami,
Yeah.
and he kept saying, "But we have to know the names. We have to know the," and that not knowing for people appears to be a huge amount of stress.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really interesting to watch. But let's go back to the first episode. The first episode is just the introduction of the Raelian movement, really, and it. I mean, I loved watching some of the old footage that was taken. I know it's taken by the late Jean Garry, some of the very old footage.
It was very beautiful to see the happy faces and the freedom and all that. And I think that's the essence of the Raelian philosophy that was portrayed the best there. Of course, we have that understanding that we have been created, that there is no God, that that we have been living with these Elohim coming from another planet, living with them, and then they went back to the stars. So, like all the ancient, myth and legends of all the continents are saying. But that is the basic. But what they didn't portray during these 4 episodes, even in the first one, is the richness of the philosophy, because it's
Yes.
not just okay, we have been created, and then and then we want to welcome the one who created us. It's more than that. It's a philosophy of life, and it's how to interact with each other, and these images were talking more than anything I would say.
I think the one overriding thing that always strikes me about journalists, and whether it be TV journalists or print journalists, is their desperate need to colour their pot. They like to stack the chips against us, you being interviewed, and myself when I've been interviewed. They love to use the word cult. Cult, the Raelian cult, the cult of Raelianism, the cult, this cult, this cult. It's quite interesting. So I asked myself, what does cult mean? The word itself means, in its original sense, system of religious worship, as you know. So we are a cult. That's true, but only if Catholicism, Judaism, Buddhism, Islam are all called cults, all of them. The other uses of the word are modern fad or craze. Every other use is pejorative, which is an insult. So they start every interview by insulting us, everyone. And certainly in America, that's actually illegal. It's illegal to discriminate against anybody due to their religion. How do you feel about that use? Do you ever address that with people when they say it?
I'm not even surprised because I've been living in France. So this is a French company, French director, and of course they have been bathed in that culture, where it's absolutely normal to call us sect or cult or and to talk about pedophilia and sex and all these things. It's so normal. And living in North America, I forget about that because it's so illegal. And and here I can say that I'm Raelian to anyone. Oh, what is that? And I explain, oh, that's cool. And that's it. I mean, they will not question. And it doesn't, I mean, it's part of their teaching that you don't question that kind of thing.
There was something that I thought was really fairly significant about the initial episode, and that was that there were, in the documentary itself, and certainly in that chapter, there are two ex-Raelian members who were there to criticize us. And in the first documentary, particularly the first chapter of it, they were saying how good the movement had been for them. For example, Damien says, in fact, his quote is, the philosophy, it certainly relaxed me. I was a very closed off teenager. I was emotionally deprived, and Rael definitely brought me out of my shell.
Yes, and it's such an illustration of actually what is not covered in that series is the teaching of Rael, because all over all during that series we see the basic about like the understanding who have been created, that there have been prophets before, that they want to come back, that we want to build an embassy, that is covered. But beside that, Rael is that messenger, but he's bringing much more than that. All the values, the universal values that we want the everyone to live by, but also what matters for the individuals. I mean, okay, we should all have minimum. The minimum to live, all should have a roof and all these things, but also the teaching about the emotions and how we have been, all our emotions are guiding us. So it's very close to Buddhist teaching and Hindu as well. I mean, I loved listening to, for example, to what Sadhguru is explaining with the inner engineering. It's this inner engineering is so close to the inner teaching of Rael, and that he has been teaching for 50 years, right? So, and that is what is fascinating every one of the Raelians. That's what we are. That's why we're meeting. That's why we are following him. We are going there. It's not. It's not. Of course, we want to welcome the Elohim. It's our mission, and that's what we work for. But the teaching and what he does for our well-being, and because our well-being is coming just from us, it's not from him. It's like all the tools that he's giving. That's what I was hoping we could see more during the whole series. But yeah.
Yes, I thought it was very telling that they kind of the series itself left Maitreya quite absent for large parts of it. But I think another thing, coming back to the testimonies of the two original dissenters, really, to the Raelian movement in the documentary, Dominique Saint-Hilaire, who's the female one. There's a guy and a girl, Damien Marsig and Dominique Saint-Hilaire, who are both opposing the movement. Dominique herself, she says, when I came to the movement, I was a battered woman. I was battered. She'd been brutalized I guess in a I don't know if it was she's not specific whether it's a personal lover relationship or parents or anything. She says she was a battered woman, and she came, and the philosophy, the teachings restored her confidence in her own physicality, her own body. She reconnected with that, and she also rediscovered that love is real. Love can be an amazing thing in her life, not just something that actually causes her pain. So I thought it was hugely significant that the two dissenters were nothing but complimentary about the movement, really. I mean, there's lots of little trivial things that can be said, but I thought that was very, very significant for me anyway. I thought it was very telling that they don't focus on any of that at all. The documentary only focuses on kind of tabloidy, trashy accusations, which we will come to. I think it's very interesting. And George Fenech, who's the magistrate member of the team that are standing against us, he's so critical of Rael, particularly of Maitreya. He says some terrible things about him, and not once does he back anything up. Not once. He says, I've just written down some of his quotes here. He says, the movement, everything is a manipulation. People, you and I, lose the ability to reason. Bridget, I didn't know that but we have no reason left in us. These organizations shift from flower power to harmful power. And that's what he was saying that Rael has done, yet he supplies no proof and no evidence whatsoever. Rael uses a form of manipulation, he says, yet he supplies no proof and no evidence whatsoever. And then he goes on to say, Rael said, if you want to follow me, you can follow me. I mean, shocker. But if you don't, go in peace.
That's highly manipulative.
That's what I mean. I don't understand. I just don't understand how a trained magistrate can speak like this without any evidence whatsoever. It is something that I find almost unprofessional. Like he says, for example, with the embassy project, obviously for people who don't know, who are watching this discussion, the Raelian Movement's goal is to build an embassy for extraterrestrials. And there's lots of inroads with that. We've got an organisation that are communicating with several governments around the world, and that is progressing. And it's something that it's a long journey, but it is progressing, and it has continually progressed since the embassy project started. But he says, with the embassy project, the greed and abuse of power could really be felt, in some cases going as far as outright extortion. Yet he supplies no proof and no evidence whatsoever. It kind of dribbles out of his mouth. And I watching him, I kind of think it's a brilliant example. If you want to retain your credibility, is don't speak like George Fenech, who he says so many things and backs up none of it, not one shred of evidence. And what I thought, that's consistent throughout the documentary, whether we're talking about Bridget McCann, the lady who alleges that my friend who works in the West End Theatre is a sex slave, who, like, it is never backed up. It is just insults thrown at us.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think it's bizarre to
Yeah.
that he can do that. I don't understand. Is that normal in France?
It's very French. They see that damaging when you ask money for a project. I mean, living in the US, there's not an idea of a project without the funds, right? Any foundation is like, yeah, you collect funds so that you can function, and there is a huge amount of that, of the huge percentage of whatever is collected that is taken for the functioning of the foundation, which is not even the case for the Raelian movement, because all the funds that are collected are not even used for as overhead. I mean, we don't pay rent for any locations. We don't. Nothing. It's all saved for the embassy and controlled by multiple Raelians who can see the money is there. So you can't be more transparent than that. But French people have some issue with the money.
It's bizarre because even yourself and the other teachers who travel to many seminars on many continents to help people travel on your own dime. You pay for the seminar, you pay for your own food, you get no perks at all. So you pay to be there, you pay to go there, you pay to travel there. You're not paid. It is a fully voluntary organization, and then you're accused of like extortion. But as a leader of the movement, and myself too, they'll accuse you happily of abusing money, but then when they find out that you're flying and paying for your own journey to go and teach Raelians, they'll say that you're manipulated and abused. Like you are both things. You are a manipulator and you are the manipulated. It becomes a bizarre. Say anything you possibly can to try and get some mud to stick on the wall. It's a bizarre state of affairs. Because I'm a fairly outspoken, even in my industry, in the theatre. I've stood against. We all know about #MeToo and all that sort of stuff. And it exists in that doesn't exist in the theatre, but abuses have always existed in the theatre. And I have been called in my own industry difficult for standing on the side of women and reporting it, and them coming to me and me having people fired from shows because of their poor behaviour. And yet I, as a Raelian, am called weak-minded, which I find infuriating. People lose the ability to reason. Honestly, I find it exhausting. That
the thing about it, you see that magistrate, that attorney, at the end said that Rael is a success.
Yes. Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, absolutely.
So, that's for me. That's the conclusion, that even that guy had to admit that Rael is a success.
Because he couldn't believe it when he saw that they turned the camera around with Rael stood on stage teaching in Okinawa, or Tokyo, wherever that particular video was. And there are like 1,000 people in front of him, and they go, "Oh, he's still around. Oh, didn't know about that." This kind of like detached the brain from reality completely. I thought there were some very funny moments in the document, apart from all of the toxic nature of some of the people complaining was bizarre. But anyway, that's the first episode. We've mentioned the use of the word cult often. They love to call us a cult, and they love to say Raelian scientist Bridget Basilier, Raelian sex slaves, Raelian this, Raelian that, but they would never say Jewish Epstein sex scandal. They don't say Jewish Weinstein scandal. They never say that because oh, hang on a second, that's absolutely disgusting. How dare you prefix Jewish to a sex scandal? Yeah. How dare you do that? It's okay to do it to Raelians because, they're an easy target because we just chuck everything at them. It is a form of bigotry and a form of, I would like to say it's got unconscious bigotry, but I don't even think it's unconscious. Journalists do it all of the time. It's toxic, and everybody knows it's toxic. But really powerful organisations with loads of money that spend their money on PR and spend their money on lawyers, which we don't do any of that. We're all amateurs. We all just do what we do. They wouldn't dare say the Jewish Epstein sex scandal. They wouldn't dare. And I think that's very telling. Anyway, that's the first episode. So yes, so the second episode, which again just motors along. It's very slick, the production of these Netflix documentaries. They just have almost no. I hesitate to be just damning. Do you know what I mean? But it's almost like they have no integrity. You'll say anything in order for people to go, "Ooh, what did he say then? Let's turn that volume up," whether it's true or not, whether it's backed up with evidence or not. Right. It's just said in order to do that. And I think it's in episode 2 where initially they introduce the clonate and your announcement of the birth of baby Eve. But again, we don't need to talk about that. But I'd like to talk about the other things that surround that, like Bernard Siegel.
Bernie Siegel.
I again, he's a very. I have to be kind to him. He's a very likable character. I look at him and I thought, oh, he's like, he seems like a nice fella, But his quotes that are published in that documentary are bizarre, to say the least. Let me just tell you. So he says this. He says, "A human clone will walk amongst us. That person's legal rights must be protected. He wants a legal and medical safety net for a clone." I agree to a degree, and I don't agree because of this. Because in order for you to need specific legal rights for a clone and specific legal rights for a medical safety net, first and foremost, you have to discriminate against them, because they're all protected under the American Constitution as human beings, because that is what they are. Again, they wouldn't walk around with a diamond in the center of their forehead. So you go, "Oh, there's a clone." They're human beings, just a human being. And I just think some of the comments are a little, if you really want to look into the comments, I think they're a little bit ill-conceived, from that point of view. And he goes on to say, which I think is very telling. He says, "Clonade came into my backyard. I wasn't going to let that go without a fight. But baby Eve is the focus of this case. It's not about Rael. It's not about the Raelian movement. It's not about Bridget." He says, and then he says, "But I thought to myself, maybe I'll make legal history. I'll be the first person ever to bring a case to protect a human clone." And everyone was breathless. He's so excited about himself. But it's not about you. It's not about Rael. But it does seem to be a little bit about him, to be fair. He says, and then he says, "I felt I was like a hunter after the most elusive prey ever." And that's you, by the way. And there she was, someone who thought she was above the law. You thought you were above the law there, Bridget. Someone who thought she'd never come into a courtroom ever. He's also psychic. He knows exactly what you're thinking all of the time. I don't know if you were aware of that too. But Honestly, I just think it's and then when you come into court, he says in his narration, I thought, I've got you. Like, it's his. He says it's not. It's all about baby Eve. It's all about baby Eve, about protecting the child, but it's a little bit about me. It's a little. I just think. I just thought it's very. I just think it's funny, but that makes me like him a little bit because he shows his humanity, his wish and his need to raise his profile. But yeah, but he does say that he does say this, which I think is a little bit. Again, it has darker connotations to me. He says I want a legal and medical safety net, as I said earlier on. And so I decided to look in a little bit to the legal and medical safety net. And I want to say all of this stuff because I know I know you come across Bernard at conferences and stuff like that. So I want to say what I think, so you don't have to say anything. And that is, he says he wants a legal and medical safety net for a clone, and he wanted to take Eve, because it's very notable in the documentary, Bridget, you're the only one who's protecting that child. You're refusing to let her come into a circus, and it clearly is a circus. You refuse, and you put yourself in danger every time you get on a stand or talk to anybody, and refuse to do that. And you're the only person that's protecting the child, and it's so apparent in the documentary if you look. He says, I want a legal and a safety net, and I want the court to appoint a guardian for the child, basically to take the child into foster care.
Taking the child. I mean, that was the scariest part, because I realized that if I were giving any proof or any presenting them all the kids, you know, one by one
Yeah.
when they were born, they were all at risk, right? So that's when I just gave up on everything and said, okay, I'm not gonna. I prefer to lose my credibility, my
Mm.
reputation, and have these kids protected. Yeah.
And I think even in the documentary, if people want to look, if they want to be toxic, they can be toxic. Of course they can, because Netflix set it up like that, and that's the way they play the game. But if people truly want to look, you are very honest about the fact you lost your children in a custody battle because you were Raelian. And that heartbreak of being torn away from your children, is very apparent, I think, when you're saying, I will not allow them to take this child away from their parents. And
Mhm.
I think it's something that's never said. It's not talked about. It's just mentioned in sort of disjointed comments. But
Yeah.
as a mother,
Mm.
you went through something that is horrific.
You can't imagine a child barely a few weeks old, I mean, a few days old, already being taken from the parents who invested so much into having that child, not in terms of money, nobody paid me for that, but in terms of
Mm.
emotions. I mean, they went through everything before. It's cloning was the last resort. Yeah. So
Yes, but your staunch, steadfast refusal to put that family in danger, I think if you want to look in that document, you can see not only where that comes from professionally. As a professional person, you were doing something, and you'd rather not protect yourself by selling somebody else down the river, which I think is hugely commendable. But the fact that you've lived something similar yourself, and I think it's not addressed at all in the video, and I think I can only imagine that heartbreak of what you live, Bridget. But the real dark thing that I think about taking the child as a ward of court or into foster care is that I was looking at the Centre for the Rights of Abused Children just to see what I could find information wise regarding foster care in the United States, and it says 20,000 children go missing from child protection every year. 20,000 children go missing from child protection in America alone every year. Many are never found by law enforcement, but they are found by sex traffickers. And these are reputable sources that are saying this. The USA Today, USA Opinion, it's a part of their organization, and it says America's missing foster children. 55 children will disappear from American foster care today. and every day, basically. The past 20 years, agencies have closed cases on 100,000 missing American foster children. And Mr. Siegel, with respect to him, is talking about he wanted to create a safety net for baby Eve. Well, first of all, you have to have a net. First of all, there has to be a safety net. You can't say that that is a system that's working. And to want to remove a child from parents who clearly have gone to the to the extreme of everything they can possibly do to have a child that they wouldn't be caring parents. I think it's irresponsible, to be perfectly honest with you.
No, he just had another agenda. I mean, his agenda was not to save baby Eve. As he said, it was to chase me and to get fame. He didn't catch me, but he got the fame.
Yes, I think it's very telling because he says, "This is my favorite picture," and his favorite picture is you walking into the courtroom, and he's like on a table just beside, like this guy just sat there at the table just behind you, and he goes, "That's my favorite picture." I was thinking, I got you, I got you into court. But but I say I do think he's a likable character. I didn't dislike him. I just thought, oh come on, mate, come on, stop trying to convince me that everything's noble and all you're doing is anyway. I've said it once, I won't say it again. There's a journalist called Jay Weaver who was a New York-based journalist. I think, if forgive me if I'm where he was actually based, but he was talking about his editor, and he was like saying his editor shouted at him, "Get me that Raelian baby! Get me that Raelian baby!" When you're dealing with the press, who are at fever pitch, they're frenzied. And he says we had all these international journalists wanting the story, all the New York networks. Who are the parents? What are their names? It was such that everyone lost their minds.
Yeah,
I totally get why you wouldn't give them anything. Totally understand. I wouldn't. The circus nature of what was going on was amazing. What was that like to live, Bridget? Like, what was it like? Were you isolated from it because you had to hide from it? Or what was isolation like? What was it like living that? Because it's a crazy environment, from what I see.
it was exhausting, as you said. I mean, I was so happy with the results, and then we went into the first few days after that got so crazy that I had to back off, and the parents did too. And then after that, I slowly realized that the path to follow was not the one I anticipated, and I had to shut that down. And that was. It was difficult, a difficult realization somehow, but at the same time a relief. Okay,
Yes.
let's get out of that. That I don't want to get into that anymore. I mean, it was the accumulation of 2 or 3 years of intense interaction with the media. And so I knew what they were capable of, or what to expect. I knew all that, and I said that's not what I want for these parents, for the baby, for anyone involved in that. So and at the same time, France. I mean, it was really crazy. France passed a law very quickly.
Yeah.
Like stating that French citizens would, face 30 years in jail if they do it, or 3 years in jail if they advocate in favor of cloning. So that was sealing it somehow.
Yeah. And extradition would be sought wherever possible. I remember the quote when it was handed to me on a piece of paper. I went, "Wow." And extradition would be sought wherever possible. And I think I've mentioned this to you once before, that America and France diplomatically weren't really speaking to each other. And I can't remember why. But you are single-handedly responsible for America repairing their diplomatic relations with France in order to try and paint you into a corner. So well done.
I think, I really think that we unified the world
Yes,
with this story. We unified it, not in the way we wanted, but
no, sure. Sure, but
Yeah, yeah,
you take what you can get, don't you?
yeah.
I just, yeah, I think I think it's because the law was stacked against you. I mean, George W. Bush. In fact, it was Jeb Bush's state that were taking you to court, and there was lots of rumours at the time that Bernard Siegel was actually pushed by Jed Bush in order to take you to court, in order to slow the whole process down, whilst George W. Bush was trying to change the law to make sure you couldn't offer proof and couldn't go into this whole thing, because as soon as there is a clone living, and everybody knows it, it calls into dispute the idea of the soul, the existence of a soul,
Mhm.
because that's why they love to say that a clone would be a monster. But they said this about IVF children too, did they not? And
Yeah.
but it calls into question so many things about religion,
Mm-hmm.
and very religious presidents and state officials were desperate to silence you. And I mean, that was apparent to me. I was being asked questions about it in England. So, do you think that there is something being stacked up in order to stop evidence coming out, always off camera, always never written about? Often the journalists would ask that. I mean, even the critics of the movement in that documentary are they they are saying really positive things about us too. They are, Damien has his issues, whatever, but his basic premise is that it helped him. The movement did
Yep.
help him. It helped him
It
hugely.
really, I think, from what I know, I mean, we worked together, and actually for a very short time, because when the first lab was closed, he went back to university, and
Yeah,
I went back on searching for more funds and more. Like he said, I was the
yeah,
leader, I was the CEO of that company, so I had to do things like he described, that he criticizes, but that was my job. And finally, that's how I found the technician in South Korea who did all the embryos and all that. And he was never in that loop anymore. He was completely
yes,
outside pursuing his PhD. So that's why he could say this. It's fake. He didn't have access to the new team, right?
yeah, of
But
course,
this being said, there's something else that he confessed, and I think I mean, I really love him deeply because we have been close. But he confessed that he went into studying science because he was Raelian, because he wanted. So he's today
yeah.
living in China and doing uh, beautiful research, but it was inspired by Rael. Yeah.
I think I think it's a very in depth. But we could talk about that situation. I could talk about it with you for hours and hours and hours, and I'm sure you're sick of talking about it
Yeah,
yourself. But
and telling you all like, during that time, I was receiving so much support at the same time. People could
mm,
believe. I mean, I said I unified the world. It's more like the official world of leaders, party leaders, and governments and religious leaders, but human beings, simple human beings, understood what was going on better.
yeah,
And I had some support that way. So that's where I've that was feeding me, because the rest was not. I mean,
I've almost missed it again. Whenever we talk, to talk about it's in episode 2, and we've skipped past it, but to talk about the terrible, I can't pronounce and I can't remember to pronounce the name of the TV show where Rael was shouted at by Paragar, the
yes,
man
yeah.
called Paragar.
Before, the media was pretty nice with us. There was no one was trying to you know chase Rael in any way or anything like that.
Mm,
Suddenly there was that, and Rael was not. I mean, his answers, he was cut in his answer. The way it went, even when he explained that he tried to explain a position on sexuality, and and all that, it was cut. So that was a big shock for everyone, because they realized He was not trapped, but like it was, yeah, a form of trap.
Ambush, like
Ambush,
an ambush. Yeah, it
ambush.
was a full on ambush.
Yeah.
I think it's important to say there is a big backstory to that TV show, which they don't go into in the Netflix documentary, which again I kind of think is a little bit irresponsible to not tell the story of how that happened. And forgive me for just letting people know the actual backstory. And if I get anything of the story wrong that you know that I've got wrong, please let me know. But I've done loads of research on this, and I've read a chapter that was written by Rael in a book about this, and it was translated a little while ago. Paragar and his wife came to the Raelian movement, and it's fair to say, I'm cutting loads of bits out, but it's fair to say that his wife, who I won't mention her name because she has a career, and I don't want to drag it around for her. But he was a criminal. He was a car thief, violent. He was a sex trafficker, pimp. He had all of these issues in his life before he came to the movement, and he brought his wife, who was a singer, who is a very good singer, and still has a wonderful career as a singer, and is a lovely person who I like very much, and she basically, when he'd gone back into prison, she stayed in the movement when he'd gone back into prison for a crime that he'd committed for something, and she had decided that she was going to leave him. They had a couple of children, and she started to see a young Raelian guy. She started to see him, and they became a very tight knit relationship. The guy loved the children and looked after them and was very caring to them by all accounts. And then Paragar came out of prison, and his wife had been the girl who stayed in the Raelian movement, got a new boyfriend, had been given custody of the children because of the behaviour of Paragar and because of the crimes that he's actually been convicted of. And he then set out specifically to discredit the Raelian movement in order to discredit his wife, in order to try and get his children back. So he made any allegation possible, as loud as possible, which obviously at the time, because Rael was a big deal in France, he was this young guy who said he met an alien. People were taking it seriously. People were looking at it. They'd read the book. They were inspired by something. A lot of people were inspired by the story. The movement was very strong in France. It was growing every day. And if you look at some of the archive videos in the first episode, you see all ages, all types of people coming, because they were all inspired by Rael. So as soon as one person said he encourages me to have sex with children, which was a total lie, everybody wanted to hear about it, and it was set up to get the biggest ratings possible on that particular show. And it was a total sham. And even if you look at the Netflix editing of that, or the editing of the I don't know who edited the actual exchange, but Rael is answering a question, which is, do you let them talk about this? Meaning their problems. And he says, of course. And I've been on TV shows where lots of people are shouting at me. This morning was one of them, which is a very big TV show. It's like 5 people all shouting at me at once. And it's impossible to hear anybody. But the guy in the mic, the guy who's mixing the mic, can hear everybody perfectly because he's got everybody on an individual track. And somebody, it says at some point, but he touched, or somebody was talking about touching a child with their finger, or teaching a child to touch themselves, I think is what the allegation was. And then Paragar shouts at him and says, because I followed you, I encouraged my wife to sleep with other men, and I did touch my children. He made all of these allegations. And at one point, Maitreya, when that's been shouted at him, I did this and it's because of you. Rael says, hang on a second, we're all adults, and everybody screams at him and tells him how, and they boo him and obviously his mic's taken down and he can't say anything. But that sentence that he was never allowed to say is crucial, because I have heard Maitreya talk very much about taking responsibility for yourself. And if he says, we are all adults and you are responsible for what you do, and I am responsible for what I do. If I aid what you do, then I'm responsible to the degree that I'm responsible. But I'm not responsible for you when you do something that I don't know and I'm not telling you to do. But they cut that off. They make sure it's never aired. They make sure he doesn't get the opportunity to speak. And all it is allegations thrown around. And then obviously it turns potentially violent. It is the most out of control. I mean, because the chat show host is on the show, and it's embarrassing. He loses control of his own show. It's impossible to know who's saying what to whom at what point. And it is hugely irresponsible to even put it in the show without for Netflix. In my personal view, it's hugely irresponsible.
Not even giving Rael the time to answer or anything. It was just like pure ambush. There was at no point he wanted Rael to answer anything. It was cutting
They
edge.
say at one point, "So do you let people touch children?" He goes, "Of course not. No, it's not. It's not what we do. It's against our rules. It's against the if you can call anything about the Raelian movement as a law, it is. We do not and will. No Raelian will ever impose their will on anybody else, specifically not a minor. It is one of the main tenets of our philosophy." Is to not do that, and I think it's hugely irresponsible, and they don't even put it to Maitreya now in the documentary. He's not even offered an opportunity to speak now.
No.
They don't go to him and say, "How do you feel about that now?"
Yeah, but what I liked is that even the Raelians that were there the ex-Raelians that were there to portray us badly,
Yes.
said they never saw any pedophilia in the movement. So somehow they just confirmed that. So I mean, whoever, hopefully people will see that through, right? But it shows somehow what was happening in France at the time. And that's the same mentality that made them decide that because I was Raelian, I could not get the custody of my daughter. It's the same logic, because I mean, I've always been a good mother, I believe. It's like, I did everything I could for my children. They are so important for me. And then there was nothing they could tell about me. I was taking them to class, to whatever after class activities they had. I was doing everything that a mother usually does, and the only thing they could blame me with was the fact that I would believe that we have been created by aliens. Is that
Yeah.
is that disqualifying me for feeding my children and giving them
Yeah,
love?
I know. Honestly, my heart breaks when I think about losing custody, and your testimony in the documentary is brief, but it's very poignant. Which is again why I was trying to link it to you refusing to allow that. You would not be party to that happening to the parents of Eve, and in a way, watching that documentary, I got it more intensely. The motive I got it before, but really intensely. I think it's very clear when you couple the two happenings together. Losing your children for a period of time, obviously they came back to you as was quite rightly predicted.
Yes. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and
Good relationship.
I've met two of your children, and they're both utterly delightful, people. I just think it's so powerful in the documentary. But they try and make it not powerful by separating it so far and never discussing it. It feels like there's lots of truth in the documentary, but the truth is like peppered around and not focused on. And I can't, there was moments that I actually got it for the first time because I didn't see any of the circus around you, because I had a circus around me at the time, and I was like, okay, yeah, but fun. I enjoyed it. I had a great time. But yes, it was definitely a circus, and I think it's very apparent that when if you really want to look, you basically see what you look for, don't you? But
Yeah, it's yeah.
it's very apparent that you were the only one that was saying no. I'm not putting that child in this circus. It's not happening, which I think is very, you should be commended for. Just to move on again slightly to Bridget McCann, the very brave journalist who infiltrated a public meeting for a week. I thought a holiday, and took several lovers apparently in the movement. I don't know.
Yeah.
Not that I'd like to. I got idly gossip, but she had a very brave, like James Bond character there. I think she infiltrated a public meeting, which anybody could go to. In fact, she would have got more access had she said she was a journalist. She'd have probably been shown around. She'd have probably been taken places and given, a chat with Rael. As it was, she seems to have gathered no evidence of anything at all, and no photographs of anything at all. And there's a couple of photographs of her sat at a table like this, and there's a couple where she sat in a field. And she makes allegations which are bizarre. She says when we arrived, they told us we all had to get naked. Anyway, I don't have a problem with nudity for one thing, but she says everybody had to get naked, and then they show this clip, and I'm going to pick up my laptop and show you, okay? Because I'm going to put it in the thing. I don't know if you can see it. They show you this photograph there. I should take it back one step first, really, because I've covered the bums up. There are two naked bums there, and everybody else has got clothes on. And she says, we were told, we had no choice, we had to get naked. But I did actually remove the bums as well, because again, I don't have a problem with anybody's bottom. I think they're beautiful things. But it was a totally false accusation, which is even shown in the documentary. She's saying, yeah, they made us get naked, and then the only footage they got of it is people with clothes on. So what was she doing with her time? She had a photographer, and she didn't take any photographs, by the looks of it, of anything that she alleges. She didn't take any photographs whatsoever. And then she talks about this ceremony. It was like a ceremony where dancers danced, and she says it was kind of a symbolic ceremony. These women we saw were naked, and they belonged to the Order of the Angels. So I looked at what the word naked meant. I thought I knew what the word naked meant, and it means having no clothes on the body, or nude, as in nude. No. And again, the photograph of the video they show is people, women stood in line. Some are topless and some are fully clothed. That's the video, but they show it. And from my understanding, because the person who choreographed that is a friend of mine. I've known her for a few decades. I've worked with her several times, and she's talented. She's a great singer. She's an actor. She's a wonderful dancer. She's done films. She's done everything, and they then say that she's a sex slave, which I don't understand, because she was in pantomime last year in London, and I know she just moved back into her flat that she'd rented out for a period of time, just a couple of weeks ago. Is that she alleges these bizarre allegations. She goes on to say, Rael is a malicious manipulator. He's addicted to female submission. I could tell how he loved this kind of female submission. I don't know. And yet the only pictures she's got, she's sat at the back of a field or in the canteen having lunch with a load of people, like in a corner like this. She has no interview with him. She has no contact with him at all. It just seems bizarre that these allegations would be ever taken seriously. Did you meet her? Because I know you're in the actual video. I wasn't there that particular seminar.
Yeah, no, I mean, of course, the leader of the group that did that show is a professional. She
Yeah,
organized show in the West End and then in
yeah, yeah.
probably Broadway and everywhere. And McCann
Hmm.
hasn't probably never left Montreal, right? So she can't see the power of these women.
That's right.
And that's what it is about for women in the movement. It's women empowerment, and she's such an example of that powerful women. And she saw them as slaves.
I know it's utterly bizarre. I find it. I think when I sat there, I couldn't actually believe it. And in watching that episode, because this is really episode 4, we've skipped to episode 4, but in watching that episode, I sat there. I was actually quite, in some ways, because I'd heard, oh, there might be some things. I was like, what on earth can they make out of what we do? Because we know what we do in the movement. I was like, what on earth are they going to find to say? This. But I heard a lot of, oh, episode 4 might be really difficult, might be, and I'm like, what? I watched it and I was actually relieved. I mean, I was, if that's all you've got after infiltrating for whatever she claims is 9 months, go home, because she is the worst secret agent I've ever come across. But because what I honestly don't know how, and sorry to rant, but this is a little bit of a rant on my part, is that she says this. She says, these women are sexual slaves, which is a huge accusation, an accusation of slavery. Okay. She had her phone with her. She had somebody to take images with her, recorder, who was going to record everything. And yet she didn't call the police. She made no complaint. She didn't try and help anyone out of a situation that, and we know it's nonsense, but she made no effort to help these people. What she did was exploit them. She exploited people at that meeting by lying about them, claiming things that she couldn't and didn't and has never proved. She is the worst kind of journalist. And I honestly don't understand how a company like Netflix can even bring themselves to air that, because they don't ask her the question, so did you call the police? They don't ask the question, how long after you left did you go straight to the police station then? Because surely these slaves must have still been there at the Eden campground. Nobody asks any important questions. What they do is they literally try and tear the movement apart by innuendo and accusation. It's like almost like a high school gossip in the changing rooms. Ooh, I heard this and I heard that, with no proof whatsoever. And I find it utterly embarrassing for them.
Yeah.
And I think it's only a matter of time that fair-minded people look at that and they'll start saying, but what did they do with these slaves? Did they try and free them? Because it's a real important issue. Sex slavery, sex trafficking is a massive, current, important issue. And this woman rode on the back of every truly sex trafficked, truly exploited man, woman, and child to write a book and make some money. And nobody questions her on it. And it is utterly shameful. Utterly shameful. But that is what Netflix did in their 4th episode.
Yes, and you may have noticed the quote that's been popping up quite a lot on all the card inserts that I've made, where Bridget McCann freely admits that the whole thing was done for revenge. Over, I guess, frustration with the Raelian Movement and Clonade over baby Eve. But it's an incredible thing to actually admit whilst you're in the process of slating the movement and telling lies about them. She is a shameful character and a shameful human being, as far as I'm concerned.
Rant over. Sorry, but how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I remember. I mean, I met her when she was there because, at the time, I mean, it's mentioned in the documentary. I was looking for more women to carry the child, right? And so I had a meeting organized during that seminar, and all the young women came and then wanted to volunteer, and I explained what it takes, that. So we had that meeting, and she came and volunteered. but there was so much fear in her eyes, like, you know, like this, the the deer with eyes in with light in their eyes, you know, that she had that. That's I never took
Yes.
her. I mean, she didn't pass the first step. That was obvious. Yeah. So nobody was really due, but we welcome everyone. Everyone. I mean, it's so easy to infiltrate
Yes, an
us.
open door
You
policy.
just apply and you come and you attend, right? I mean, anyone should do that. We should all go to this happiness academy and infiltrate us. That's so easy.
Yeah, I hope. She doesn't look like she benefited much, because she looks like she's so tense in the, even in the documentary that she's putting out. You know, she looks like a very tense person. But it's I the shame is in the producer and the director and the editorial staff of
Yeah.
Netflix not addressing, because they're
Yeah.
hugely important issues, and they are just. It's like used to have an acting coach years ago. Somebody said, "Oh, a soap opera, they talk about really important issues," and she said, "Whoa, stop! A soap opera talks about all the important issues and then trivializes them." And that's what that documentary did about that issue. It's like the world hears a philosophy that human beings created life here through science, and that they are wanting to come back. They have all of this wonderful story that's there, and all they do is they hear the word sex, and that's all they can think about is sex, 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 sex. What do you think what do you think is the way through that? How is it possible to move past that in for us as a movement? How is it possible? Because we've been tarnished unfairly for so long with this.
I think somehow it's by having documentaries like that. You know, it shows where people are at, and then we have to explain why they are this way. The reason I'm saying that, they are traumatized because they had to look at the anus. Okay,
Yes, yes, I know.
that's
Yes,
that's where we are at. That's where the society is at,
and
because I
it's their own. It's
believe.
their own one. They're looking at their own one. It's not looking like somebody else's. And they've had it with them.
But
They
if
carry it with them
even if you
everywhere.
had to look at someone else's, that would not be the you know the an issue, right? Yeah.
Maybe not. No. Yes,
So
it's bizarre.
when for me, it just shows where we're at. We should what we teach, what the Raelian philosophy teaches, is that this body is is a masterpiece, and absolutely every detail is contribute to that masterpiece. And all the other religion, especially the Christian and the Muslim religion and the Jewish one as well, have demonized some part of this body. Some part of this body, we don't talk about it, we don't even touch it, or we yeah.
Yes.
And that's the first step if we want to go any further into freeing people to be really what they should be, is like this body completely um, empowered. We need to accept everything. So that's one step. So they skipped the step in explaining what it is, and they went from aliens and up to we had to watch our anus. That's a very traumatizing experience. Without explaining why we do that, that's education. That's what we have to tell. We have to take them, and it's same with sex. We are all born because our parents had sex, and we should be able to say it that way without people having eyes down, or blushing, or not or trying to take the conversation somewhere else.
I truly, it's really interesting to hear you say some of those things, because I truly think that even when I witness people being defamed on TV that's got nothing to do with me emotionally or my life or whatever, I get annoyed for them. I
Mhm.
very rarely join the crowd. It's not part of my personality, because I don't like bullies. I don't like bad behavior. Never have. And I truly believe that the people who are more advanced emotionally, more advanced in their objectivity and the way will see that this is defamation. And again, Maitreya not being Rael, not being on the show as much as he could have been, it's very difficult to say for them to say Rael bad, Raelian Movement bad, when you've got like this beacon of shining light that can actually stand there and just make you laugh, make you look at yourself. You know, often when he speaks, you think he's talking right at you. You know, I've had a thought in my head that how did he know that? You know, and it's an amazing relationship an audience can have with Maitreya when he speaks. How could they show that? If they show that, they've got nothing. They've, you know, if their editorial policy is to poke fun at us, the last thing they're going to be able to do is show a lot of Maitreya, because he can be such a dynamic, wonderful, engaging, funny speaker. And yeah, sure. So the fact that they had to not show him so much spoke volumes to me. It said a lot. We can't show him because of X, Y, and Z, because he comes across so well. And the few little moments they look to do, they're so manipulated. I did notice this, that when Maitreya speaks in English and they want him to be heard in English, they let him speak in English. When they want to make him sound, because there's one moment where they try and make him sound angry, and they've got a voiceover that goes, which I've never heard him in my life speak like that. So, but they do a voiceover of somebody doing that, which is clearly manipulative, because if his mic's on and they know what he's saying, they will have been able to show his voice doing it, not a voiceover doing it. But the voiceover speaks in a very aggressive manner. That's massively manipulative. So it does appear that the editorial policy of the producers was to try and do that, which is a shame. I mean, it is a shame, but I trust that the intelligence of our brothers and sisters of humanity ultimately. And just as Raelian, thank you for all that you do. Thank you for all that you have done. And it's wonderful to talk to you. I have huge admiration and huge respect for you. And thank you for giving us your time to talk about these issues. Well done for allowing the documentary to take place, and for pushing that as a project. Congratulations. I think you're doing a great job. And thank you for talking to us. And see you soon, I hope.
Always a pleasure to be with you.
See you later.
Thank you, Glenn. Bye.
Bye.